They fined me $500.00 for fishing with my daughter while grieving her mother's death. That's how it started. What they didn't know? I used to build startups that crushed monopolies for fun. So when the HOA came swinging with fines, lies, and a smirk named Karen Wellington, I did what any quiet, rich, grieving man would do. I bought the lake they thought they owned, exposed the fraud they swore didn't exist, and turned a petty neighborhood empire into rubble, using their own bylaws. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a blueprint for it. And if you've ever had a run-in with an HOA, a nosy neighbor, or just someone who thinks rules matter more than people, go ahead and like this video, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, it gets juicier. My name's Remy Thorncroft. 2 months ago, I was living what most folks would call the American dream. Retired at 42, sold my shares in a few tech companies, walked away with more money than common sense, and moved into a pretty lakefront house in a place called Lakeside Estates. It was supposed to be quiet, healing. My wife, Rachel, had passed the year before, and my teenage daughter, Selin, hadn't smiled in months. So when I found this neighborhood with its glistening lake, walking trails, and fancy HOA brochure full of empty promises, I thought, maybe this is where we start over. All I wanted was to give my kid one place where the pain didn't follow us, somewhere peaceful enough for her to just be 14 again. You know, before grief turned her bones into bricks. So picture this. It's a Saturday morning. We're fishing off a dock, me and Selin, finally catching a breath of normal. She reels in a bluegill, lets out a laugh I hadn't heard in half a year, and I think to myself, maybe, just maybe, we're gonna be okay. That's when the voice cut through the air like a drone strike in yoga class. Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing? Now, there are women who lead with grace, and then there's Karen Wellington, the HOA president and unofficial mood assassin of Lakeside Estates. Blonde bob, designer sneakers, yoga pants tight enough to cut off circulation to the truth. She was tapping her iPad like she was ordering a drone strike. Fishing is prohibited, that's a violation, the fine is $500.00. Just like that. No hello, no hey how's your grief, just boom. Here's a ticket for having a moment with your child. I told her the realtor said fishing was allowed. She gave me that HOA smile, the one that's legally 90% smug and 10% Botox, and said the regulation changed last month. You should have checked your email, she said, as if sorrow stops for spam folders. I asked her why the ban, and she launched into something about fishhooks, ducks, and the Lakeview experience. Meanwhile, her Facebook page had photos of her and her wine-sipping squad throwing lakeside parties like they were auditioning for Real Housewives of Property Lines. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, packed up our gear, and walked Selin home. She looked up at me and said, "Dad, why was she so mean? We weren't hurting anything." And I didn't have a good answer. Because the truth is, some people like power more than peace. And in places like this, a little power goes straight to the HOA president's head, like boxed wine on an empty stomach. That night, I didn't just check my inbox. I checked the county records. I read every clause in the HOA bylaws. I learned who built the lake, who leased it, and who was pretending to own it. And what I found was delicious. See, the HOA didn't own the lake. It was leased. And that lease, about to expire. Karen was trying to buy it for herself, using HOA fees to build a bunch of luxury homes and kick people like us off what was supposed to be community property. And that's when I smiled for the first time in a long time. Because I knew something Karen didn't. I wasn't just some new guy with a fishing pole. I was a retired financial wolf with a vengeance budget. And I had just found my bait. If that first chapter got your blood boiling or your petty gears turning, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button so the algorithm knows Karen's days are numbered. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with HOA nonsense. Bonus points if it involves grass height or mailbox drama. And make sure you subscribe because trust me, the lake wasn't the only thing I bought. The best part's still coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger, but calculation. You see, grief teaches you a strange kind of patience. You learn how to wait, not because you want to, but because pain won't let you move fast. So while the neighborhood snored behind their hedges and HO-compliant porch lights, I was digging through property filings like a man possessed. That lake? It wasn't owned by Lakeside Estate. It was owned by a company called Meridian Development Corporation. The HOA just had a lease, and that lease, it expired in 57 days. 57. That's 2 months of Karen acting like Queen Neptune of a lake she didn't even legally control. And just when I thought I'd struck gold, I learned something even better. Meridian was in financial trouble. Deep trouble. The kind of trouble that makes you pick up strange calls and say yes to cash offers you normally wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. The next morning, I stepped out to get some air and ran into Merrick Henderson, a sharp-eyed older man walking a tired-looking beagle named Justice. He lived 3 doors down, retired ethics attorney and apparently the HOA's unofficial whistleblower. When I mentioned Karen and the fishing fine, he let out a dry laugh and said, "Let me guess, tablet? Tight pants? Air of inherited superiority?" I nodded, and he just shook his head. "Karen's been running this place like her own little empire. Most folks just pay up and stay quiet, but if you're serious about pushing back, come over later, I've got files." I took him up on it. His living room looked like a library married a courtroom. Over 2 cups of perfectly brewed French roast, he laid out years of Karen's tactics, weaponized violations, secret fines, selective enforcement, and even property flips that somehow always landed in the hands of her real estate buddy. Her HOA presidency was less about community and more about controlling assets, flipping homes and squeezing anyone who didn't play along. That night, I met Samuel Washington. Merrick introduced us like a general meeting a tactician. Samuel was a retired banker who had lived in the neighborhood longer than Karen. His study was cleaner, but his records? Even sharper. He'd been quietly tracking HOA activity for a decade. Violation notices, home sales, fines, board votes, all cross-referenced. And the data didn't lie. Residents of color received fines 3 times more often than their white neighbors. New homeowners were hit harder than longtime residents. And Karen? She'd built a network of shell companies to scoop up discounted homes that were conveniently harassed into devaluation. It wasn't just petty power. It was a quiet, smiling heist, disguised in landscaping codes and Christmas light rules. And the lake? That was her endgame. Samuel showed me zoning maps and plans. Karen wasn't protecting community beauty. She was prepping the land for development. She wanted to turn the lake into a gated luxury row, strip out public access and sell serenity by the square foot, all under the HOA's nose. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I wasn't going to argue with Karen. I wasn't going to email her back or file a complaint. I was going to beat her at her own game. Quietly, legally, permanently. I filed paperwork for an LLC, Thorncroft Holdings. Harmless enough. Then I started watching Meridian's moves. I called an old contact in commercial real estate, just to check. Meridian was desperate. They'd taken out loans for a downtown complex that had collapsed mid-pandemic. Their lake was now a liability. And I was liquidity wrapped in flannel. I could close fast. No financing, no board meetings, no drama, just cash and a deadline. But timing was key. Samuel advised we wait, let Karen burn her bridges, double down, commit to her big HOA lake vision. Let her push new fines, announce new fees, maybe even call for a special assessment to fund the purchase she thought was hers. And then, when she was deep in it, we'd pull the rug out, not in anger, but in brilliance. If you've ever been steamrolled by someone who thought power made them untouchable, you already know the feeling boiling in my chest. This wasn't just about a fishing fine anymore. This was about every neighbor who got silenced, every family who packed up and left instead of fighting, every child who got told they didn't fit the community culture. I wasn't just buying a lake. I was buying back dignity. And if you've ever wanted to stand up but didn't know how, here's what I'll ask. Like this video right now if you believe the system should serve people, not power. Share it with someone who's been told to sit down and smile. And leave a comment if you've ever had to choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy. Because this story, it's just getting started. 2 weeks after I formed Thorncroft Holdings, I signed the purchase agreement for the lake. Cash. No bank, no delay, no noise. Meridian's executive practically hugged me. He said I was the first pleasant surprise they'd had since their downtown project tanked. We finalized everything in a private downtown office, far from the HOA's twitchy radar. The best part? Karen still thought she was in exclusive negotiations. She'd told the board, told the mayor, even told her tennis friends. She was planning a visionary transformation of our beloved lake. She even printed renderings of a members-only lakeside lounge. Real bougie stuff, fire pits, wine bars, even valet parking. You know, for the 2 people in the neighborhood with anything worth valeting, and while she smiled through town halls with her fake humility voice, I was filing deeds and drawing property lines. The clock was ticking, and Karen had no idea she was planning a party on someone else's lawn. But power doesn't give up quietly. It senses threats. Within days of the lake purchase, my mailbox became a punching bag for HOA violations. Mailbox too glossy, garage door color not compliant, unapproved ground cover near the front shrubs. It was like Karen had deployed a drone to scan my lawn blade by blade. One notice even cited me for inadequate weed mitigation protocol. I didn't even know what that meant, and I used to fund biotech startups. Then one afternoon, Selin left her bike on the driveway for 10 minutes. Just 10. When she came back outside, a violation slip was taped to our front door, complete with time-stamped photos. That's when I knew someone was watching the house. Not metaphorically, literally. The HOA had eyes on us. Probably one of Karen's informants or some nosy neighbor with too much Zoom on their phone and not enough purpose in their life. It wasn't about the rules anymore. It was pressure. It was war. Still, I didn't flinch. Because for every new violation she tried to pin on me, another neighbor quietly slipped me their story. Diana Winters got fined for unsafe garden hose placement. James Morris was hit with a citation for having a bird feeder that invited pest behavior. Maria Gonzalez's foster kids were banned from the pool after Karen claimed they were too loud. The HOA had become a pressure cooker, and Karen was sitting on the valve. Every time she turned it up, another family cracked. But not us. Our secret group had grown. 30 households now, quietly resisting, sharing stories, cross-checking violation patterns. Samuel set up an encrypted group chat. We were building more than a coalition. We were building evidence. It wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA president anymore. This was systemic abuse wrapped in neighborhood charm. And the day Karen tried to call my daughter a negative influence was the day I realized this wasn't going to end in paperwork. This was going to end in spectacle. Still, I almost folded. Selin came home one day crying. Some kid told her we were troublemakers. Said their moms said we were hurting property values. I asked who it was. She said Brianna. That's Karen's granddaughter. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the lake from my window and wondered if I should just sell the house and leave. Clean break, take the win quietly. But then Merrick called. That's exactly what she wants, he said. She's done this before. 6 families, all driven out, all replaced by her buyers. Don't hand her the pen to write the ending. He was right. I'd fought bigger battles for less. And this one? This was personal. So I called Samuel and we set a date. I was going to reveal the truth. Not with drama, but with proof. Let Karen throw her party. Let her smile for the crowd. I'd bring the mic. And the deed. If you're still with me, here's what I want you to take from this moment. When people try to scare you out of your own life, silence doesn't protect you. Strategy does. Don't wait for someone to hand you the right time. Make it. If this part of the story lit something up in you, hit that like button so more people hear it. Share this with someone who's ever felt outnumbered in their own neighborhood. And drop a comment if you've ever stood your ground, not with fists, but with facts. Because next time, Karen's throwing a party, and I'm about to send everyone home. Karen's lakeside bash was set for Saturday. Invitations were slipped into mailboxes, but only for longtime residents. The not-so-subtle message: if you weren't HOA royalty or hadn't kissed the ring in a recent meeting, you weren't welcome. It was a bold move, claiming territory that legally no longer belonged to her. I could have stopped it early, sent out a community-wide email, waved the deed like a trophy. Nah, that would have let her off easy. I wanted her to step all the way into her illusion. The deeper she went, the bigger the fall. So I kept quiet. While Karen was ordering catered charcuterie boards and floral centerpieces like this was a Napa vineyard, I was on the phone with my lawyer finalizing the early termination of the recreational lease. Grounds: environmental neglect. The algae bloom alone was enough to void it, and to really drive the point home, I also filed for no trespassing enforcement to begin the day of the event. Now, Karen wasn't stupid. Arrogant? Absolutely, but not stupid. Word must leak that something was shifting, because suddenly I got a visit from her. She showed up at my doorstep in her best passive-aggressive outfit: cashmere sweater, clipboard, fake smile. "I hear you've been in touch with Meridian," she started, all sugar and concern. "I'd hate for any misunderstanding to disrupt the harmony of our community." I smiled back and said nothing, just nodded like I was listening to elevator music. She got twitchy fast. "You didn't do anything drastic, did you?" I told her, plain and calm, the lake's been sold. Her eye twitched. "To who?" I shrugged. "Wouldn't know. Hope the new owner's friendly." She left with the energy of a raccoon just realizing the trash can is bolted shut. That same afternoon, my lawyer sent me the final stamped document. I was now officially, legally, and privately the owner of the lake and the 10-foot perimeter around it, including the dock where Karen planned to make her big toast. Saturday came. Sunny, smug, and packed with Prosecco. Karen wore white like she was marrying the lake. She gave a speech about heritage and preservation and how the HOA was in final talks to secure our beautiful waterway forever. I waited until the jazz trio started playing. Then I walked up, flanked by Merrick, Samuel, my lawyer, and a uniformed police officer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I picked up her microphone like I was adjusting it. "Good afternoon, hate to interrupt, but there seems to be a little mix-up," I said. "This lake? It doesn't belong to the HOA anymore. I bought it, and the lease? Terminated as of this morning." Karen tried to snatch the mic back, but I held on. "Which means, technically, you're all trespassing. Officer Reynolds here is just here to make sure everyone gathers their wine glasses and heads out peacefully. You've got 15 minutes. You could hear the Prosecco curdle." The crowd broke into confused chatter. Some people looked furious, mostly her allies. Others looked relieved. A few actually clapped. Karen? She looked like someone had unplugged her battery mid-sentence. "You can't do this," she snapped. "We have rights." I raised an eyebrow. "You'll want to check that lease clause. It expired in 28 days anyway. I just accelerated the timeline." She sputtered. I smiled. "Rules are rules, right?" That line landed harder than the mic drop. "I didn't do, but considered." As the residents filed out, many gave Karen the look people usually reserve for politicians caught on tape. One neighbor muttered to me, "I never thought I'd enjoy being kicked out of a party." I nodded. Sometimes it takes the right host. Within 48 hours, Karen had called 2 emergency board meetings and made 3 threats of legal action, all hollow. My lawyer answered them with receipts, dates, and fine print she hadn't bothered to read. That was her fatal flaw. She thought power made her immune to consequence. But I didn't fight with noise. I fought with documents. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone get publicly evicted from their own fantasy? Because let me tell you, it's a special kind of justice. And if this story hits close to home, if you've ever been silenced by someone who thought their title made them untouchable, hit that like button right now, drop a comment if you've ever had to flip the script on a control freak, and subscribe, because what happened after the party, that was just the spark. The real explosion came when the community found its voice and used it. Stick around, you'll want to hear what they said next. Karen didn't go quietly, oh no. She went like a raccoon in a trap, loud, dramatic, and convinced she still ran the show. The day after the great HOA eviction, my security cameras caught her pacing the shoreline in designer flip-flops, on the phone with someone at City Hall, probably trying to file a zoning tantrum. Within a week, I started getting random visits from the city inspector, Karen's cousin by marriage. Coincidence? Not a chance. Suddenly, my deck needed immediate safety assessment, and my fence may violate updated elevation standards. That's HOA code for "we're not done messing with you." Meanwhile, my mailbox filled up with new citations. I was apparently now in violation of unauthorized mulch texture and mailbox font irregularity. Font, as in the numbers on the side of my mailbox. Karen was losing control and lashing out in every direction. But the pressure backfired. See, while Karen was busy weaponizing mulch and fonts, the rest of the neighborhood had questions. Real ones, like, why was she planning to build luxury homes using HOA money? And did she ever have legal authority over the lake? Sapphira Dusklin, a board member who usually stayed quiet, stood up at the next meeting and asked if the special assessment fees Karen announced were ever actually voted on. Karen tried her usual icy shutdown to threaten to not renew Sapphira's flower shop lease. But this time, Sapphira didn't back down. She showed up to the next meeting with receipts, literally, copies of budget allocations, missing vote logs, and 3 pages of discretionary expenses, all tied to Karen's pet projects. It wasn't just about the lake anymore, it was about the money. And now, the room was paying attention. That was the moment the dam broke. One by one, neighbors began speaking up, some with shaky voices, others with years of silence boiling over. James, the retired teacher, revealed Karen fined him 3 times after he spoke at a council meeting against an HOA budget change. Maria, the healthcare worker, showed documentation that her foster kids had been banned from the pool on a weekend Karen's grandkids were using it. Diana, the widow, shared photos of an impromptu inspection Karen led through her backyard without notice. It became clear this wasn't leadership, it was targeted harassment, dressed up in polo shirts and policy. By the end of the meeting, a motion had been filed. Full audit of the last 5 years of HOA financials and a vote to restructure board leadership. For the first time in a decade, Karen's power wasn't just questioned, it was collapsing. Meanwhile, I wasn't done. I had one more move. Quietly, over the last few weeks, I had used my financial network to purchase several mortgage notes through Lakeside National Bank, focusing specifically on properties linked to Karen's closest allies, including hers. It was all legal, all above board. The bank wanted liquidity, and I had cash. I didn't intend to foreclose, unless I had to, but holding the paper gave me leverage. And in neighborhoods like ours, leverage speaks louder than threat. At the next community meeting, I revealed everything. The lake ownership transfer, the recreational use clause expiration, the purchase of the mortgage notes, and then I made a promise. I would refinance any neighbor's home below market rate if and only if they voted to implement HOA term limits, independent financial oversight, and a rotating ethics board. I didn't want control, I wanted reform, and the community? They were ready. If you've ever felt powerless, like someone else wrote the rules and stacked the deck, know this: systems only stay broken when no one questions who's holding the hammer. If you've made it this far in the story, do me a favor, hit that like button. If you've ever wanted to flip the power dynamic on someone drunk on control, share this video with the friend who keeps saying, I wish someone would stand up. Drop a comment below. If you've ever realized the real fight wasn't about the rule, but the right to question who made it. Because next time, Karen won't just be out of power, she'll be out of options. And it gets better. It didn't take long for Karen to snap. Once she realized the mortgage on her home had been quietly purchased by someone she'd been fining for mailbox crimes, she lost that HOA queen composure like a bad wig in a windstorm. She called an emergency board session, closed door of course, to accuse certain residents of threatening the moral integrity of the community. Translation: I had outplayed her, and she knew it. Her final Hail Mary spread a rumor that the lake was toxic and my ownership was endangering public health. She even sent out flyers warning residents that fish from Rachel's lake, yes, we had named it after my wife, could cause hormonal imbalances in pets. I'm not kidding. One of my neighbors asked if I had put birth control in the water. That's how deep into desperation she'd spiraled. But here's where karma laced up its boots. My environmental team, real scientists, not HOA gossip, we'd been quietly testing the lake for weeks. Not only was it safe, it was cleaner than it had been under HOA management. Phosphates and nitrates were down, oxygen levels were up, and the algae bloom was in full retreat. I held a press conference, just a small one with a local paper, to announce the lake's new mission, a conservation zone and free educational space for neighborhood kids. That hit Karen where it hurt most. Her illusion of moral superiority. While she was drafting her next round of fake pollution alerts, I was handing out junior fishing licenses and letting kids name the bluegills. One of them called the fish Mayor Karen. I didn't correct him. Still, Karen wasn't finished. In a last-ditch effort to get the lake back, she tried to bribe Merrick. My guy. She offered to clear all his old violation notices and promised him a seat on a new, restructured board, with a stipend, of course, if he could convince me to sell the lake to the HOA. But Merrick? He hit record before she even finished her pitch. Scare him a little, she whispered. Tell him about environmental liability. Make him nervous. He just smiled and kept sipping his coffee. When he played me the recording later that night, I almost choked on my drink. Karen had no idea the man she was trying to manipulate once taught legal ethics at a state university. Never try to buy off the guy who helped write the rules. We sent the audio straight to the HOA's Interim Ethics Review Board, newly installed thanks to our reform vote. They didn't just open a case, they opened the floodgates. And oh, it got worse for her. My motion-sensitive cameras picked up footage one night, Karen and two board allies trespassing by the lake with flashlights and a bottle. They crouched near the water and poured something in. Within hours, I'd filed a police report. The bottle contained a concentrated pesticide, likely intended to spike water samples and validate her pollution lie. That was the first real environmental hazard the lake had seen in years, and it came from the woman who banned my daughter from fishing. Karen was charged with criminal trespassing and attempted environmental contamination. The moment that mugshot hit the local paper, her empire cracked. Homeowners began filing civil complaints. Investigators dug into her HOA spending. Her real estate license? Suspended pending investigation for unethical practices. Within weeks, she had a sign in her yard. For sale by owner, but no one came knocking. Let me leave you with this. Systems don't crumble when you shout. They crumble when you document. They crumble when you organize. They crumble when you outthink the bullies and make them play by the very rules they abused. If this part of the story gave you hope or made you want to check your own HOA's fine print, like this video right now. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet resistance isn't weakness. It's the first move in a long game. And comment below if you've ever been underestimated, then came back with receipts. Because the next part? That's when we built something better than revenge. We built a future. 3 months after Karen's empire crumbled, I stood on the same dock where this whole mess began, this time with my arm around Selin, watching neighborhood kids toss lines into Rachel's lake. That's what we named it. Not out of spite, not as a mic drop, but as a reminder that this place was supposed to be peaceful, healing, human. I had officially transferred the lake into a community trust with 3 conditions. The HOA leadership had to be fully restructured, term limits enforced, and an independent ethics board installed. No more dynasties, no more backyard dictatorships. The vote? Unanimous. Even Karen's former supporters had seen enough. Her house sat on the market like a haunted doll, pretty on the outside, but everyone knew what had lived there. No buyers, just quiet. Safira was elected HOA president. First thing she did was open the books, Turns out over $80,000, 0 cents, had been funneled into beautification projects that somehow only beautified Karen's side of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the main park, the one where most families actually went, had rusty swings and no lights. That changed real quick. Within weeks, families who hadn't spoken in years were showing up to community meetings with ideas, not just complaints. Maria's foster kids got their pool passes back. James got an apology. Diana got help fixing her backyard, not a fine. The air felt different, like someone had cracked a window in a house that had been sealed shut for a decade. But I wasn't done. Quietly, I revealed that I'd also purchased mortgage notes on about 20% of the homes in the neighborhood, specifically those that had been targeted or undervalued by Karen's policies. Legally, I could have called in the debts or sold them off. But instead, I offered every homeowner a refinancing deal below market rate on one condition. They commit to keeping the community fair, transparent, and neighborly. No more weaponized bylaws, no more secret meetings. Just real people making decisions out in the open. Most folks were stunned. A few cried. One guy gave me a pie. I still don't know what flavor it was, but I ate it like it was justice. Then came the real victory. That fall, we held the first ever Rachel's Lake Conservation Day. We invited every family in the community, except the remaining HOA dinosaurs who hadn't yet resigned. Kids got fishing poles, painted conservation signs, and learned how to test water quality with real scientists. Selin helped run the event. At one point, she sat next to me on the dock, leaned her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "Mom would be proud of you, Dad." I didn't answer right away. My throat locked up. But eventually I said, "I think she'd be proud of both of us." And I meant it. Because we didn't just survive this place. We changed it. A year later, Lakeside Estates had become the blueprint for HOA reform. 3 other communities adopted our charter. I got asked to run for mayor after the old one resigned. Turns out Karen's buddy had his own skeletons. I politely declined. Instead, I started a scholarship fund in Rachel's name for kids who lost a parent to cancer. Because in the end, this story wasn't about a lake, a lawn, or a laminated rulebook. It was about what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet. If you're still watching this and wondering if standing up is worth it, let me say this plainly. It always is. So hit that like button if you've ever fought for peace in a place built on control. Share this with someone who thinks they're too small to change the system. And drop a comment if you're ready to write a better rulebook. We did it. You can too. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.